next on stage, we have a session, Technology and the Politics of War. A highly disruptive topic, could be with great impact. I would like to introduce the chair, Mathew Swift, who is the co-founder, chairman, and chief executive officer of Concordia.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. And let me just say first and foremost what an honor it is to be here this morning with you all, and how incredible it is to be here in Iceland. First, a major thank you to Savannah and Hannah. This is incredible. My name is Mathew Swift. I'm the chairman of Concordia, and Concordia, in part, we develop partnerships and public-private partnerships, but we also hold different summits all around the world. And so I can attest to how challenging it is to hold, there's Savannah, I can attest to how challenging it is to hold these different forums. So my respect to both of you and to the entire WPL team. It's really amazing what you've done. So thank you so much. We have a partnership, Concordia, with WPL. And WPL has done something very important for us as we think about some of the biggest issues facing our time. And that is that at different forums like this, when talking about public policy issues, when talking about different topics that require these kinds of conversations to advance solutions to these sort of issues, it is most imperative to talk about women in the context of their expertise. And so WPL has done that for Concordia, and in return, we're very excited to be here today. This is an important conversation that we're about to have. Thinking about the role of technology, thinking about within that gender, and thinking about within all of that conflict. So we're going to ask some very, very important questions of our distinguished panel today, all of whom bring a disparate array of expertise, but I think will answer some important questions. First, I'd like to welcome Claire Hutchinson, who is the Special Representative for Women, Peace and Security at NATO. Second, I'd like to introduce Binta Diop, who's the Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security at the African Union Commission. And lastly, I'd like to welcome Delia Ferreira, who's Chair of Transparency International. Thank you so much. So I think we all can agree that this is a topic that has far more unanswered questions than answered questions. And when thinking about the role of technology in our lives, there are so many challenges that we're facing. We see it all over the news today. We see it in conversations about just about every type of subject, whether from a security perspective, a data security, a privacy perspective. But let's talk for a minute, given that we have NATO represented on this stage, let's talk for a minute about specifically the policies that you're developing in your office on women, both as risks and victims within a broader context of cyber warfare. So please, Claire, let's start with you.
Okay, thank you. And I've got to first say how delighted I am to have a conversation in a women leaders forum about this subject, because I think too often we're sidelining the soft from the hard issues, and we need to realign issues of technology, cyber defense, and put it where gender speaks. And we haven't done that yet. And for NATO, my role as working for the Secretary General directly is to make sure that we align all the policies of NATO and make sure that we get a woman's perspective, both a gender perspective, and we're getting increasing women into the environment we work. For us to integrate gender into the cyber pledges, into the work of cyber, is, I think, one of the last walls we have to pull down. We have to make sure that we're understanding what does it mean to women when we're looking at the issue of technology and cybersecurity. And we look at it from two sides. One, women are not just victims of cyber. They're also exponentially growing as crackers and hackers. They're used as honeypots to entry into backdoor systems, right? They are actually actively becoming part of the cyber community. But on the other side, they're also being used, as we've seen with the growth of the recruitment of women to Daesh. More women were being recruited online. And I think what we have to get used to is that those who are not necessarily the friends of peace are using the technology faster and better than we are. They're really engaging those who want to be recruited, those who are wanting to engage or are marginalized or are not part of the peace movements, would say. They are moving faster, and we are not keeping up. And as an international community, I don't speak of NATO, I speak as us in the international community. And we have to get to know this. You know, and technology is a double-edged sword. Throughout time, we've used technology, from the invention of the bow and arrow to the Gatling gun. We've always used technologies. What we have to understand, it's both for the work of peace, but it's also against peace, right? So we also have things like development apps, where we can detect early warning, where women can feel then safer. So we have many apps that are being developed. When I worked with peacekeeping in the field, and I would see women using apps, using technology, using WhatsApp. They'd never used a mobile phone before. So they were connecting with families. So I think we have to understand it's a multifaceted, multi-layered environment, but we have to understand it. And that is what we're not doing. We're not getting the whole complexity of technology and how do we build it into the policies and the doctrine that we are using for both political and military. That's what we're trying to do.
All right, so let's go from the macro and let's talk about specific examples with you, Madam Diop. What specifically are you doing as it relates to your role currently at the African Union Commission and specifically on the ground? Because I think some examples would be very helpful for this.
Yeah. Thank you, Mathew. And let me again thank everybody and the organizer and this beautiful country for inviting us, many of the African women in this room. We are very delighted to be here. Mathew, the African Union is accelerating the access to new technology by putting in place, in the schools, for example, to put in place ICT tools for young girls and boys. So I think we need to accelerate that. So from my own perspective as the AU Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, it's 1325. You know what does it mean? 1325. This is a tool that we use to empower women either to participate or to be protected during the wartime, but also in the issue of prevention, like Claire has already mentioned. Let me give an example. Yesterday I was seeing a video here by Crisis Action. This is one of the examples. We use the platform for a whole day to make sure that South Sudan be in everywhere seen. I think 12 million of people were watching or listening to rally behind the issue of South Sudan and the women that have been suffering. I spent 6 months in South Sudan documenting and investigating on violence against women in South Sudan. Women have been raped. They are still in refugee camps. But that platform gives visibility, and we encourage that. UN Women, the Deputy SG, all of us, we were together to amplify the voice of women in South Sudan. Another example for me, when the Chibok girl have been abducted, because it's always good to give example. It's good to have the theory, good to have the policies, but how do you implement them? That's the issues. So when the Chibok girls were abducted and, bring back our girls, at the African Union, we have the Peace and Security Council, like we have the Security Council in New York. So when I went to discuss with those Security Council members to intervene and to help Nigeria to intervene, they were denial that something was happening with the Chibok girls. And that's why for many months, we could not do whatever to rescue the girls. So I went to the north of Nigeria, where Boko Haram is. This is my life, is to go to Somalia, where we have the Al-Shabaab and other places. We need to be there to see what is actually, because I always say, when you go there, you give hope to the women. motto, we go on solidarity mission, stay with them even if they're in a dangerous place, and see how we can support them. I met one of the girls who escaped from Chibok. Later on, I went back with Amina Mohammed, both of us, to meet all the ones that have come back with UN Women. But I met one of the girls, and I filmed her. I took a film, of course, with protection. I came back to the Peace and Security Council. I said, listen, you are the one taking the decision in Africa. Watch this film and tell me if this is not reality. Soon after that, because of the power, I could not take them to meet the Chibok escape. By myself, I took the Chibok to them by bringing that film. That's the power. They say, this is real. This is true. What she's saying is reality. So let's make sure that we take a decision right now and support Nigeria to make sure that we rescue those girls. So this is why the Chibok girls, and I always say that we are not going by digital platform, to change the narrative or anything. It's not that. Because the issue is the women themselves who will bring the issues. It's not the digital then can be the one to talk about the issue. It's the people. So you need to bring the voice of the voiceless through those platforms who will be able to influence. Because at the end of the day, is how do you influence the policy and to have the change that you want to see. So if we need to build that platform together, let's make sure that we use that digital to make sure that we influence the Policy Security Council. Recently, I was in the Sahel and the Great Lakes and other places, the Lake Chad Basin, where Boko Haram is exercising, just to meet the women that are suicide bombers. I was with the joint mission with the UN and the African Union, and we were able to mobilize the media, the press, to say this is it. Because those who came back, those who are back who don't have job, the girls and the boys that are in those islands, we need to take care of them. But we need also to tell the international community, if you don't want them to continue to be suicide bombers, we need to work on development. And that is where I'm just linking the agenda of peace and security to the agenda of development. Unless we find job for the girls, unless we find job, and unless we look into those human security in the ground, I don't think that we will get rid of Boko Haram or Al-Shabaab. The military only will not defeat them. We need to work on the development agenda, on humanitarian agenda to defeat those extremism, either Boko Haram or Al-Shabaab. Thank you. Through the women, of course.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Delia, let's build upon this. At Transparency International, you focus on a number of different subjects. Combating corruption is certainly one of them. How is technology a force for good in your experiences?
Well, technology is really a very important tool for us in terms of connecting and organizing people in the fight against corruption. And we have special teams working on defense and corruption, because money hasn't been mentioned here, but it is a very important actor in this plot. We use also technology in terms of sharing information. We have fought for many years asking for access to information. Now, through technology, we can make this information more available and to use information as a powerful tool in order to hold governments to account, because information can reach the citizen and can allow citizens to use that information in order to participate more effectively in decision taking. But on the same side, we have to take care of the challenges that technologies present or the risk they put in our work, because this extensive use of algorithms can create the opportunities for a concentration of power, not just in the traditional hands of the executive, the legislative, or the judiciary. We are ready to hold these powers to account. But technology can concentrate power in those designing and deploying algorithms that would take decisions in terms of public policies or even our personal lives. And I think we are already working in TI, in Transparency International, in order to be ready to hold these new powers to account also. Because in some time in the future, and in terms of technology, the increase is exponentially, while public policies or institutional reactions are slow, the distance between these advances and our reaction in terms of politics is even greater every day. So in the future, we will have what I call algocracy, that is governance by algorithms. And with the argument that artificial intelligence is neutral and is not biased as we human beings. But behind each line of an algorithm, there is a human being, probably in terms of the warfare technologies, very far away in terms of geography and very far away in terms of time, probably, when these tools were created. But behind these algorithms and these technological tools, there are human beings with their biases and their political intentions, and probably we have to take care about this problem before the problem comes here.
So two important questions then that I come to from that. First is, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, Claire, misinformation or fake news. Yeah. So I want to hear, I'd love to hear from any of you on that. And then the second is, how do governments, especially, organizations not known for their speed and efficiency, manage to protect people from the incredibly fast advancements of technology? So why don't we start first on the misinformation piece, because I think that's an important element that you just raised down there.
And it's a really good point. I think we're seeing a growth in, I mean, the use of social media and the open spaces to provide fake news, let's say, right? The information that's put out there. And, you know, in terms of security, in 2013, the Syrian Electronic Army issued a tweet. I don't know if anyone remembers this. They issued a tweet to say that the White House had been attacked and President Obama at the time had been injured. And it took down the Dow Jones by, I think there was something like $3 billion were lost in the space of 2 minutes. So the idea that technology is not only physical attack, but it also attacks all of the other areas of our society that keeps us safe, like the economy. And we need to understand this, that the fake news that's put out has a growth, has a domino effect on other areas of safety. This is one of the pieces of security we have to build into how we look at how we're using the technology and how we're keeping safe our populations, because it's much more prolific than we imagine it to be, and much more dangerous.
Well, and Madam Jopi, the example that you used, you actually did tackle enormous misinformation through the use of technology.
So I really wanted to link it to the women leaders that are in this room who are in politics. I was here listening to them to the battle to get to the power, and that power is shrinking for women, and in particular in our continent, in Africa, because of this news, the fake news. You know, when they are running for political positions, attack on the integrity of the women. So you listen to them, they will tell you, many of them, I'm leaving politics because it's a dirty politics. Because the fake news that we get, and the no protection, the family are attacked, the integrity are attacked. So we are mobilizing to say to the government, as you say, to be more proactive to protect the integrity, not just the body, as we say it in terms of security, but the family. So I think the women's movement, we need to be more on social media, because what they can do to we can do to protect. We can mobilize to protect women, the women in leadership. We can dismantle the fake news. Because sometimes I said, when I read something on somebody I know, and I said, this is not about her. Because we need to know each other. It's not about them. This is not the one they describe in this news. So just bringing it again to the reality is how do we protect ourselves when we are in politics or other place of leadership position to dismantle those fake news. So that's one of my proposals.
But Delia, how do you do that? What is it that you want governments to do?
Well, the first thing is that in order to be ready to face the problem, we have to talk the language of the problem. And here we have two communities. The scientific community, which speaks in terms of technology in zeros and ones, and the political community or the ethical community, which speaks and see the problem in other way and with other language. And these two communities in many countries are completely separated. They are not talking. They are in echo chambers.
Sure.
So they cannot really create the multidisciplinary platforms in order to really address the problems in a proper way. And talking about fake news, they have been used to manipulate voters or elections.
Sure.
But we have to take care that it's not only fake news, it's the possibility of hacking infrastructure, crucial infrastructure in a country, or hacking the electoral system. And think about the Internet of the Internet of Things, or the use of these technologies embedded in our simple things. How many computers have the car you are driving? Do you know that? More than 100 in some models of cars. And this is sending information and sharing information. You don't know who is receiving that information. And so that's the problem we are facing nowadays. Technology is a tool, a wonderful tool, but it can be risky. And we have to take care of these two sides.
Well, and now, of course, obviously, we're seeing this in the United States. You watch Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook go before the Senate, and essentially a lot of the questions coming was showing a clear misunderstanding of actually what Facebook is practically. And so there is this element where we have elected officials, it seems, all around the world who are not taking nearly enough time to even begin to understand technology.
But we also, this is why we have to get more women into STEM. We have to get more women into cyber, because the languaging between us as women and men is very different. You know, many years ago, I started working, way back when, I'm a dinosaur, but way back when in the early 90s, working on the internet, when it was first public. And, you know, at that time, there used to be because it was all designed by men. So there used to be an error message used to come up when there was a mistake made, and I don't know if you remember this, and it used to say, you've made a fatal error. And for a fatal error, for a woman, means you're driving backwards over a cliff, right? This is fatal error, where you could die. It's not when the computer goes down. And so the idea of the languaging of technology, the languaging of what we do, we need to assist. We need to assist by changing what the language is. Women and men interpret technology very differently. When something, and I'm being quite a little sexist when I say this, but it's fact. When something happens with the technology and it doesn't work, a man will say, the technology isn't working. And when a woman gets it, she says, I did something wrong. And that is the interpretation of us in terms of technology as women versus men. We have to adjust that by getting women into technology and taking the power of the language and the power of the technology and making it our own. That's going to change.
But let me ask just a basic question of the group, and it's something I've never quite understood. Why is there such disparity in the tech sector when it comes to women and men? I mean, we've seen this become a huge issue for some of the largest tech companies in the world, where you look at the coding population and it's 80% men, 20% women. Why is that happening?
I think it has to do with the education opportunities and also the mandate that we receive in certain cultures. Women are not prepared for math, or there are no women in engineer, and we have seen just in the former panel a very bright engineer. So this idea of there are no women is absolutely wrong. There is a very interesting foundation in Chile, in the south of Latin America, founded by women, which is called There Are women. And the idea is to collect the information about the huge quantity of women in many, many different areas that are ready to work. So we have to start by modifying these cultural mandates in many of our countries. That's not the reality of all countries.
We really need to push our young girls in science and technology. And that is what we are doing in Africa. Leaders like President Kagame, who is hosting all the time the new technology of information and the new age, but also the digital. Invite all Africans and make sure that to connect them to those Facebook and others, to make sure that the African women and men, but also the young people to get into that platform and pushing centers of excellence in Africa. We have few centers in each regions that are really capturing the young that are interested, pushing them, boosting them, and giving them the knowledge of those technology. Let me again just talk about, link it to the women who are in this room who are still politicians in collection of data. You mentioned it briefly in terms of the during elections, which is violence, especially in my continent. Some of the elections are violence against women as well. So because of the polling station that we don't control the outcome of those stations and the young people are fighting. So it's good for us also to build that synergy among us as women leaders and to make sure that we collect the data, observing those polling stations, having things that like our situation room where we bring the information. So when they come and talk about those fake news and others on that, we are able to come and say, this polling station, actually, this is what have happened. Using the mobile phone, I have seen it in Senegal, where women are very much, we have more than 40% of women in our parliament in Senegal. So it's almost 50-50. But the women are getting together to make sure that during election, they are together, whatever party they came from, to make sure that they collect data and with the support with the United Nations and the African Union. So let's get into that also to make sure that we are on the ground with the women to give them that protection that they deserve.
So, okay, we're out of time, but I want to end with one quick thing for the audience. When we are back here next year, I feel pretty confident that this subject is going to remain a constant focus of this important forum. I myself will make a commitment that at future Concordia gatherings with WPL, we will elevate women coders, we will elevate women who are working in technology because they need to be elevated more for their expertise, which is, as I said, what Silvana and Hannah have done an amazing job in helping Concordia build upon. Within 1 year, you want to be able to come back and say, we've done what? Real quick.
We've integrated the work of cybersecurity and integrated gender into all the work of cybersecurity and cyber defense in NATO.
Great.
My next mission in solidarity mission in the field, which will be Horn of Africa, I really promise to bring the voice of the voiceless, the women on the ground. This next year for Africa is the year of refugee, but making refugee issues, humanitarian assistance in a platform and making sure their voice are heard. I promise to do that.
Great.
And I commit to keep on using technology for the sake of transparency, but also keep working on how to hold to account these new powers that are behind the algorithms and the new technologies.
Fantastic. Well, with that, thank you very, very much to our fantastic panel.